Welcome to the Book Editor Show. This is episode number 10. I'm Clark Chamberlain, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Peter Turley. Peter, it's been a little while. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm just great, Clark. It's a bit chilly here in England. I think winter's finally found us.
Yeah,
But,
it
you know,
it can't decide what to do here in Idaho. It snows one weekend and then it all melts off and warms up. Like today, it's above freezing, so it's really nice outside again.
yeah. That's kind of a British perspective. It's above freezing, so it's really nice.
Yeah.
Practically summer.
Oh, I know exactly. I was when I was a teenager, I moved to California, and during the wintertime, and it just was so used to Idaho winters with all the snow and everything, and it was like 60 degrees outside, and I kept wanting to go down to the beach and go surf and everything, and people thought I was crazy. They're like, it's freezing, it's wintertime, it's 60 degrees. That's Fahrenheit, so. Just, but
So how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. So, apologize. We didn't have the show this last week. We had a death in the family. My grandmother of 102 years passed away a week and a day ago. And so there was a lot to take care of with the family and going over to another city for the burial and everything. But it went well. I mean, you can't feel terrible about someone who's lived such a long life and having them go. So.
That's certainly an impressive age.
It really is. I spoke just a little bit at the funeral, and I just had a thought before I went in, and I was looking up online and looking at all the stuff that she, the inventions and the world history that had happened during that 100 years. It's impressive. Just how much has changed in the world in just a short 100 years.
Yeah. Wow.
Our technology and how we travel and communicate and. It's just we live in an amazing age right now. So it's
we've only been kind of flying for around that long, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. Even radio was invented in that time period, or the discovery of radio waves and the ability to use those, and for like commercial radio and television and those types of things. I mean, it's just all in that very short period of time. So. And now we're doing. And now here we are today. Yeah. You're in England. I'm here in Idaho, and we're talking to each other, and we can see each other just fine. So it's crazy.
Sure is.
So, well, today we do have a real show. We're we not just catching up, but we're going to be talking about scenes and sequels. This has been, I've been hearing this since I got into writing in the last few years, fiction writing. People talking about, one of the best ways to do this is I write in scenes, and I create it with these scenes and put it together. And so that term gets thrown around a lot. But when you and I started talking about doing this episode, I was like, well, let's get on the same page here. What really does this mean to have a scene? And yeah, and so you sent over some information and about this particular individual, Dwight Swain, and he wrote this book back in the '60s, Techniques of the Selling Writer, and that's where this particular way of doing these scenes came from. So why don't you give me a little bit introduction about this?
Sure. This is something like I kind of stumbled across quite recently. And it's been really interesting. It's not sort of something that I've really had a chance to apply to much of my own work. As I say, this is quite a recent discovery, but it's so interesting in regards to on a technical level. Basically, if I can try and it's such a big one to tackle. If I can break it down, it goes on the premise of I try and understand it like an inhale and an exhale, and it's kind of like the beats that can get you through your story and allow you to pace it correctly and get from beginning to end. And it goes off the idea that, the one scene would be a inhale, which is the scene, and then the following scene would be the sequel, which is kind of like an exhalation, and it's more of a reaction to the previous scene. And each one is broken up into three parts. So you've got the scene, which is in three parts. And these three parts are goal, conflict, and disaster. And then you go into the sort of exhalation and the sequel, which is your reaction, your dilemma, and your decision. And then it loops back around and it starts again. And you can use this format as a writing exercise or to look over your own work, or you can just use it. You can literally use it to write a whole book, and that's just the beauty of this thing. It's so fascinating. And I don't know whether you want to talk a little bit about it more in detail.
Oh, well, yeah. I was, once I got down and started reading this, because when I always heard people talk about writing in scenes, I immediately went to my background in script writing, and so that's what I constantly thought people were talking about. Is it, oh yeah, you're writing a scene? I mean,
Yeah.
you see it visually and you're just putting it together and all of this. But what he has here is absolutely really amazing. Especially if you're starting to write, and of course this is an editing show, but we can use this in our editing to go back and make sure that we're hitting this type of rhythmic behavior. We talk about rhythms, and when you're not writing in a rhythm and you don't have that cadence going along, you can really pop the reader out. And so this is a really easy way to make sure that you're hitting these points. The second thing that he's got in this, you've got this scene and the sequel, like you were talking about, which is really cool, with all the goals and the action and conflict, and then of course the reactions to that, and like the character making a decision based on the disaster that they just went through, to change the course of action to still go after the goal. And this is something that I've been talking to people about lately. I just did a class the other night on the power of story and learning to write for more reader engagement. But with this, is that it has to feel real. We write real fake stories, and that the characters got to be making these decisions to get involved in the outer action that's going on, and this is a perfect way to do it. I was really impressed with this. I'm going to pull up one more thing here real quick that I want to make sure I'm saying this the right way. He also has these things called MRUs, and this is the motivation reaction unit. So you've got a motivation, which is one paragraph, where the person can have a feeling, a reflex, and an act, or the motivation, which is something that's gets put into them that they're going to react to, with a feeling, a reflex, and an action. We've put some of these together to share. We'll get into those pretty soon. But have you used the MRUs as well in your writing?
Yeah, I've come at it from an angle of, so motivation is basically, it's external and it's objective, and it can be described as what we see. So it can be the actual motivation and like what's happening, but it can also just be in regard to the detail of your writing, what the character's doing, what we can see as an audience. And so that could be like a few sentences, and then you'd move on to the reaction, which is internal and subjective. Mm-hmm. And that'll be sort of the feelings of the character. And so you could be like, Dave gets out of bed. This could be the motivation. This is what's happening. This is the action. It's objective. We can see it. And then if he feels tired, or he yawns, or he rubs his eyes, and you kind of get across like how he's feeling and the mood of it. And this is the reaction to what's just happened. And it can be as simple as like one sentence a piece, or it could be a few sentences a piece, or however long you want to, how your voice works in your writing and however you write, that's going to differ. But that's kind of how I've used it when I tried an exercise recently, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I found that going back to some of my previous writing that I've already done and published, I certainly didn't have this all the way through, but it absolutely appeared in all of my action scenes. That something happened and they reacted to that something that happened, with feeling in there, or split timing, where it's just a reflex, or moving forward to an action and a decision. Another thing that I liked with this is that it separates things. Is that it gives you very clear guidance. You're going to put in the motivation, the external thing that happened, and that's going to be its own line or its own paragraph, and then it's a new paragraph where you're getting into the reaction and what's going on with the character. And I thought that was really cool. So
Yeah, it makes sure we are sort of covering it all, and we don't want to have something happen like the baseball hit him in the head, but then not know what that felt like, or how he felt about that. You can't just have things happening all the way through, because that's boring and no one wants to read it. As we said, the reader reads because they want to feel things, and these MRUs make sure that we're getting that across, and that there is always a reaction to things that are happening, and it can help you sort of make sure that you're not leaving big, plot holes or just holes in your story where things are happening and then that's it.
Yeah, and just like you said with the emotion, I mean, that's like we've talked about it before in previous episodes, is that this is what's going to pull the reader in, and you got to have this emotion here, because without that, when you remove that emotional piece, yeah, it's just a plot, and the plot is boring, just having someone run around and get into a bunch of action stuff, and it doesn't seem to have any purpose, and it's not having an internal effect on them and what's going on, you miss out on it. You miss out on having a reader connection.
Yeah, and like you say, when I've looked over my own stuff, this isn't, pervasive of the whole work. It's not, you don't see it everywhere, but it, like you say, it's definitely there, and it is something we naturally do. But by making ourselves consciously aware of it and looking over this stuff and learning it, it makes sure that it happens a little bit more, and we're doing it in the right way. And even if we choose not to do it in every single scene or every single chapter, as long as we're conscious of that fact and we're doing that on purpose.
Yeah, that's a really good way to hit that on the head there. I want to go ahead and let's pull up just a. We'll go. Let's do yours first. I'll pull these up. Which one did you want to talk about first? The scene, the example.
The first sheet is kind of like a rundown of like what we've talked about. You can pop that up if we've missed anything off, or
yeah, I think we've hit that one pretty good. But I'll screen share that one real fast. I've got like 100 different windows opened up here. I think this is the one. Does that look right?
Nope, that's
not it.
Sort of.
That's my introduction thing. That's my cheat sheet, so I remember your name every week.
I was so touched by that as well. It's all false.
Scene sequels and MRUs. I'll try this again. Scene sequels, MRUs, Microsoft Word. Share this one here, and let's see. There we go. Now we're looking at it, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. So let me lock this in. So we're talking about here, just so we could go over this again, the MRU is a motivation reaction unit. And Peter described this very well, the external and internal motivations going on there. But it's also broken down into two separate things here. We've got the scene, where we have the goal, the conflict, and then the disaster. And then the sequel, the reaction, the dilemma, and the decision. So, I mean, you're not talking about having very much stuff here, This is really, like, when you think about it, is very simple. But when you go into your work, one of the things you're going to start to look at as you're editing is, where does this fall in? Do I have a scene? Do I have a sequel? Is what I'm writing, does it actually move the story forward? And that's one of the things I think is really great for editing, is that this gives you a great roadmap of being able to take a look at your story overall, like the complete action of the story. Does it have the goal, the conflict, disaster, and reactions, dilemmas, and then decision making that's going on, but then also the individual chapters to see if this is taking place and if it's following through, because this gives you a very clear guide and a very simple demonstration of how to put this together to engage the reader.
That's it. I mean, you can use this on a whole book basis, I think, as you kind of touched on, and it's so versatile. You can use this to go through chapters. You can use it to make sure you're including everything in the book, all the right, as you say, scenes and chapters. and you can also use it on a paragraph level. And that's what I sort of did with this next example. I was just sort of sitting there and I thought, I wonder if, you can use this to literally to draw yourself through a whole story. So, scene is a couple of paragraphs, sequel's a couple of paragraphs, and you're constantly going through this goal, conflict, disaster, reaction, dilemma, decision cycle from the beginning to the end of a book. So, there's a goal can be not necessarily what the protagonist wants to achieve throughout the novel, but what's happening step by step through the story. So, entering a room or, going somewhere or wanting to get something, these are all goals. And, you can really break it down into this little tiny baby steps to write a whole book, I think.
No, I think you can too. I mean, just take a look at something so simple as, sure, you've got a guy that wants to, let's throw out a crazy thing, he's trying to make $1 million or whatever, but then he goes to a party, and at the party he wants to get a drink, and every time he's trying to get over to the bar, everyone keeps running into him and talking to him and diverting him from that goal. I mean, it's just, and that actually will create tension, and it'll make him more frustrated, and it just brings more energy into the story.
That's it. I mean, we can't. We start off with the character wanting something, but we can't just let them have it. If the character just gets what they want, again, it becomes boring. So we have to throw these conflicts, which are basically the obstacles that the character has to overcome, at them. And then at the end of the scene portion, as you can see in here, the yellow is the scene, and the sorry, no, that's in the motivational reaction units. The yellow is the motivation, and the green is the reaction. Without these obstacles, the character doesn't grow, and there's no tension, as you say, and there's no suspense. And obviously, at the end of these obstacles, ultimately, at some point, we want them to fail, so we can embark on our try-fail cycle. And that's the disaster part of the scene. So that's this sort of the third point in scene is disaster, and we want the character to not get their goal, and that can turn out a good thing or a bad thing. And then we can move into sequel, and that's how they react to, to the setback, basically. So, are they dissuaded? Are they going to work harder? What are they going to do? Yeah. And then we reach kind of a dilemma point where there are no real good choices, and the character is forced to make a choice, and it's usually the riskiest one of the bunch.
Right. Yeah, because you want to put them back in. You don't want them to play safe. You want them off the couch. You don't want them making it easy. The worst, I mean, yes, there's going to be that point where the reader should feel like, oh my goodness, he might give up. She might give up and give in to this. But we want them to keep moving forward. And one of the reasons why is because, unfortunately, as people and humans, a lot of us don't do that. And so we're looking for that outlet, and we want to see someone else being able to do that because we can take part of their life.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
I'll go ahead and read some of this here. And this is your example from the scene. You said the yellow represents which part?
So as you can see, the yellow is motivation and the green is reaction. So there's 3 MRUs to each part there. So the first green and yellow would be goal, the second green and yellow would be conflict, and the third green and yellow would be disaster. And then you'd move into sequel, and it's reaction, dilemma, decision.
Okay, so we'll just go through this, and you can point out exactly what you've done, and I'll do the reading now. The summer sun beamed through John's bedroom window, and he ran his tongue across his dry lips. Realizing he'd studied for several hours, he figured he deserved a break and ran down the stairs and burst into the kitchen, his mouth growing drier by the second. He swallowed hard, and and by the second, that's where we end the first part.
Yeah, so that's your motivation, that's external objective, and that's the goal.
Okay, and then we move into the next. He swallowed hard and strained to remember when he'd last had a drink. He felt dizzy at the thought.
And that's the reaction to the goal. So that's one complete MRU. So that's internal and it's subjective. So that's how he feels about the first few sentences that we've written.
Okay, and then moving into the next one. Scooping a glass from the cupboard, he turned the tap only to be met with a torrent of brown water filling his sink like a mudslide. He shuddered at the sight. Gross. John spun on his heels and ripped open the fridge. Empty.
So this is introducing conflict. So we started off with a goal, and conflict can be this simple. It can be as simple as the character wants a drink and they can't have one, and that's conflict, and that's where at some level of tension is going to come into the story.
And then we move into the feeling again. The frustration flooded him. How could he let this happen?
Yeah, so there has to be a reaction to every motivation.
He slammed the glass onto the side unit, plunged his hand into his jeans pocket, and plucked the last remaining inhabitants from their final resting place. His eyes scanned the shrapnel in his palm. It was all pennies.
So this is the part of disaster. So, there's nothing in the house, and he can't foreseeably achieve his current goal.
The thought of going to the shop and paying for something with his pitiful excuse for money made him feel nervous. He rubbed his creases from his white T-shirt in an effort to look less like the poor student he was turning out to be.
Yep. So that's the reaction part to the disaster. So obviously he's feeling disappointed and frustrated,
and that's as simple as the scene. Those are the three things that we've been talking about, and that made up the scene portion of it. So I have to. Let's see. So we've got our goal, the conflict, and the disaster, which brings us now into the sequel. And the sequel starts off with a ring. He pushed open the door to the shop.
So this is his reaction to the scene. So this is the exhalation now. So obviously he can't have a drink. There's nothing in the house. He's faced with potentially embarrassing situation, and his reaction is to deal with it and to just face it head on.
Why is everyone staring at me? He could feel his face growing red as he approached the counter and greeted the cashier. The judging eyes of the middle-aged man behind the counter burned into him. Was this his low point?
So, and again, this is his reaction. It's internal. It's subjective. In these parts, we really want to be kind of in the character's head, because this is where a lot of your sort of character development's coming across. We're getting to know how he's feeling, and it's the reaction parts where we're going to connect with the story, I think.
Okay. He was nearing the end of his green mile when a woman stepped into the queue behind him, and a familiar scent greeted him. His heart sank. He turned to see his ex-girlfriend just a few people behind him in the queue.
So this is the dilemma, and basically he was faced with a potentially embarrassing situation which just got a little worse.
She's going to see how useless I am, he thought. His heart pounded. You were supposed to look good when you bumped into your ex, right? This is not good. He considered bailing from the queue, but his growing thirst begged him to stay. He had no choice.
So that's basically his reaction to the dilemma. He's thinking it over. He's a bit stressed, and the conclusion he's come to is there's no choice.
He stepped forward and presented the bottled water he had grabbed from the shelf. Will that be cash or card? Said the cashier. Cash, said John. He struggled to keep his voice low. John, is that you? Came a female voice.
So this is the decision. The decision's generally where you take the riskiest one, and obviously he's kind of edged himself into a situation here where it was embarrassing. It's now even more embarrassing. But he's in the queue. He's at the front. He's noticed his ex-girlfriend, but he's got no choice. It's too late. He's committed, so he decides. He's already halfway there.
Embarrassment consumed him. Dying of thirst suddenly looked like a far better option.
And that's his reaction to the decision. And then you would loop back around, and you could start the whole process again.
Yeah, it's just that simple. So if you were starting a new book, this would be a very simple way to do it. And if you're editing, though, these are the same things that you're looking for, these reaction elements that are taking place here. So over and over again, the scene, the sequel, the goal, the conflict, the disaster, the reaction, the dilemma, and the decision. So
that's it. And I wanted to use sort of an example like that to just get across how you can use it step by step. You can take the simplest goal, the smallest thing, and because that wasn't any idea. I just sat there and thought, what's a simple goal? And then each sentence just comes from considering what's a conflict, what's an obstacle, what wouldn't be a good thing to happen. And by considering these things, it really does, you can move a story forward in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to share one of mine, and this is from current work I'm doing right now, and this one goes, talking a little bit more about the micro version. So because we can look at the first part, the scene sequel. We can use that as a macro. We can use that over the entire book, to make sure that the chapters are falling in line here. And then I think you did a really good job with the micro in that as well. Just paragraph by paragraph. So this is just another example. It's very, very similar to what you did there, Peter. Let me pull this one up here so those that are watching can see it. So I've got the motivation in red. This is the external element that happens. So it starts off with, Rachel, you need to kill him. So there it is. Someone's telling you something, that's coming from outside. You hit a knot twisted inside her. So then we have a feeling, that the internal feeling that happens. She dropped the guard and stood up. I'm here to kill one person and only one person, and she's not even here. This is training, Joe. And so that's the action that she takes, in response to the external motivator that happened there. And then we start it over again, another one. And what happens when it's real? You're going to freeze up. You can't ever hesitate, Rachel. You hesitate tonight, you'll hesitate when you have to pull the trigger. We don't leave witnesses. Okay, and then we go to the action. Joe, he's not even a part of this. Now I want you to take note here, is that of these things, the feeling, the reflex, and the action, they can all happen, or one of them can happen, but they need to happen in the right order. You don't toss an action and then toss a feeling in. She doesn't say, Joe, he's not part of this. She felt terrible about this possible decision. The feeling comes first and then the action, as demonstrated here. No, Rachel, he became part of it the moment you let him see you. The knot twisted tighter, and she clenched her teeth. So there's an involuntary action in that one. She bent down and placed her knee on the guard's throat. I'm sorry. She pushed her weight hard against him. And then we have another motivation outside. The man convulsed as his body tried to find air. The knot snapped in her. There again is the feeling on the inside. As she dry heaved, and there is a reflex action. And then finally, her last action. I'm sorry, Joe. I can't kill him. She stood up. And that's just a simple way to look at it. But one of the things this will also help you in your editing is making sure that you're placing the feeling before the action. That's how we do things. Even if it feels like it's taking forever for us to process a thought, it's actually going by pretty quickly. But that thought and the feeling happen first before we take action, or before we react involuntarily.
Yeah, that's it. The feelings kind of happens in an instant, doesn't it? And the action kind of takes some sort of like precognition and something to sort of, it happens in your mind and then it happens sort of in reality, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And just making sure that you're putting it into the right order. And you don't have to, every single time you don't have to have all three of those like it was showing there, But making sure you're hitting those emotional things that the character, especially your protagonist, we've talked about this before, that's the lens where your reader is experiencing this story emotionally. And so that protagonist, you've got to make sure that there's emotional levels that are taking place, whether it seems as small as going in and being embarrassed by an ex-girlfriend, or as big as trying to take someone's life. We want to know what it is that they're feeling inside.
That's it. Yeah, certainly your protagonist, and basically your point of view characters. But you want to be careful not to sort of, be making point of view errors in this, and we don't want to be, hearing or the feelings or getting the feelings of the guy behind the counter, because he's not the point of view character. The point of view character is John. And these are the ones whose heads we're going to be getting inside, whose reactions we're going to be. We'll see everyone's reactions, but we'll understand the point of view character's reactions more than anyone else's.
Yeah, exactly. Off camera we were talking just briefly before, and because I was working through this and trying to find a scene that worked without and seeing the other ones that I do. And so one of the things that I do in my books, yeah, I do really have protagonists, but I spend a lot of time with my antagonists as well. And it doesn't work the same. This doesn't work the same for an antagonist, in my feeling. Because I don't want to put roadblocks in front of the antagonist unless they're roadblocks that are coming from the protagonist. I don't want to make it difficult. So it's hard. I was looking at as like, well, yeah, I mean, there is reactions going on, and you're feeling what's going on inside, but the part about the disaster, that's stopping them from getting what they want, I just couldn't see how to put that in. Have you found that to be the case with your work too, or?
Definitely, because I think we turn to the protagonist to be the obstacle for the antagonist, and we don't generally really want to be getting empathetic as quickly with the antagonist. Usually, we want to connect with the protagonist first, and maybe later into the story we can kind of see another side to the antagonist. We can understand where they're coming from, but we don't want to be usually right there in the head, constantly facing obstacles and hoping that the antagonist overcomes them, because to root for both teams is no fun. The fun comes from, our guy winning, generally.
Yeah, absolutely. And oh shoot, everyone's got to take a drink now. That's absolutely was right there. So, in my own writing, again, that Another Day, Another Name, I tried something out, with really creating a cast of characters that let people decide who's the good guy and the bad guy are in there. But I still ended up having like this external bad guy that we didn't play in the emotions a lot with. And of course, he's coming back in the next book, and we're getting deeper into him. And it's kind of fun over the long term to be able to do that. But you're absolutely right. Up front, we want to make sure that we've connected with the character who's going to give the biggest emotional impact by the end of the book, and also the one that you've written the book for. That we talked about this before. It's a target. You want to make sure you're writing for a target, and so don't scrimp on making sure that you've got one character who's your target audience character, and that those emotions are coming out strong in that character.
Absolutely. Like I was thinking that in there.
Okay, so I'm just taking a look through and make sure we've covered everything on here. Did you have anything to wrap up with this guy, with the scene sequels and the MRUs?
I think we covered everything. One thing I came across was that if you're using it on a paragraph level, a good thing to sort of consider is for each part to be around a 3 to 5 minute mark. This isn't something I considered when I was doing it, but it's something I came across, and it might be interesting just for everyone out there to consider that for scene to be about 3 to 5 minutes and sequel to be about 3 to 5 minutes. And if you are using it as a process to write through a whole book or a whole chapter, consider that, and that it can really just help you keep a consistent flow to sort of what's going on. And especially if you're just starting out and you've not really developed your own voice yet, and you're really down the practicing the nitty gritty of this stuff, keeping 3 to 5 minutes to each inhalation and exhalation, scene and sequel, it'll just help you just keep it paced well and keep it flowing, and stop you getting tied up on any one of the MRUs. But it's certainly good exercise for novices and experts alike.
Yeah, this is something I'm already starting to input into my work on the second or the third draft that I'm going through right now, and I'm just seeing where these fall into place. It's fun to take a chapter and say, all right, so what do I have here? Is this a scene? Is it a sequel? Does it have both of them mixed in there? Does it have neither? And if you're coming across that, hey, this doesn't do anything, it doesn't deliver any type of information about the goal or conflict and disaster, and it doesn't deliver anything about the character having to come to that reaction, and dilemma and making a choice, then maybe it's time to get rid of it. And that's a good measuring stick. You know, it's you're making sure that you're slimming down your work and making the strongest parts there stand out for everyone to really engage in.
That's it. That's a great way of putting it. Really make sure that, you know, characters aren't wandering around aimlessly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, and I just love that. So I've had chapters, and I don't know if you've got a couple of chapters in your book or not that are like this, but I have a couple chapters in my books that I'm like, this is my least favorite chapter. I hate this chapter. I wish it didn't have to be here. It just seems to be just delivering plot type stuff, and you know, I mean, and if you have that, I mean, this is a great way to go and spice it up. You know, you can go back into it. You can create a non-specific goal. You know, not a goal that matters for the whole overarching thing, but a goal that matters in that scene, in that chapter, that the character can be going after, and then set up some more conflict. You know, to add more tension to it, and take that boring chapter and really increase the levels of tension and excitement in there using these techniques.
Yeah, that's great. I think I heard Brandon Sanderson once said, just quickly, that he was writing a scene and he couldn't figure out why. He's a fantasy writer, for anyone out there that's not heard of him. He couldn't figure out why there was no tension and it was lacking suspense. And he said it wasn't missing much. So all he did was he added someone throwing darts and playing darts, just sort of like right near where the dialogue was taking place, and it just added, you know, another layer. And as you say, you know, you can go back and you can find something that's missing and add it in, and you know, if it's tension, something as simple as that can make all the difference.
Yeah, no, that's a really cool, simple way to do it. Again, we're talking about the scene and sequel. This came from Dwight Swain during the 60s. I think it's 1965 was the original publication date. It's called Techniques of the Selling Writer. Now, of course, you could go and buy the book, but there's a lot of YouTube videos. There's a lot of articles that have already been done on this that are free that you can look up. I will try to place those links in the show notes to make sure that you're getting all the additional information you'd like on this. So, but definitely it's worth a look. You know, if you've never looked at it before and you're trying to, you're during that second draft, you're in that third draft, you've got some things that just aren't working, take this. This is a perfect tool to go in, take a look at it, and see if you can use it to make your scene a little better.
Definitely, it's something we could, you know, I think we could talk about all night, and you know, I'd love to sort of come back at another point and, you know, look at different pieces of text regarding this, but you know, I think that was that was some great stuff, and I hope everyone out there finds it as useful as I have.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing this topic up, Peter. This was a great show today. To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review at iTunes. If you're an editor who'd like to be a guest host or an author who'd like us to edit your work live on air, go to thebookeditorshow.com. Drop us a line. I am Clark Chamberlain, and my co-host, Peter Turley. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure as always.
Absolutely. Keep learning, keep writing, and build a better book.